Well, well, well. What a shocking day, man. This market is becoming like I don't even know what to say to you all. But anyways, 3 out of 3, ladies and gents. Bond auction coming very nicely, taking away the ideas of selling America. And of course, is everything working? Yeah. And of course, investors are still seeking US debt. But I personally think investors don't know where to put their money. We've still got $7.5 trillion in money markets. That ain't moving. Bitcoin ain't moving, and it's maintaining the good old XRP formation. But tonight's live, I'm going to talk to you about the biggest risk to Bitcoin. And that's courtesy of a question by one of you guys, which I think is going to spark a little bit of, yeah. Some of you might have a thing or two to say about it. So let's get with the program, ladies and gentlemen, because Adobe are about to put out some of their earnings, and that's going to be an interesting one to say the least. And Nvidia today said we're not going to include China in our estimates. That's sad. That's what I mean. Trump is literally crushing these markets. They haven't got a clue. Today, I had to trade options. Options. I'm a scalper, man. I'm about that fast in, fast out. But today I had to play options on the NASDAQ. It just wouldn't do anything. If you're not catching the first move of the day, and that's it. Dustbin. Out. You're stuck in a range. And that tells you where the market's mentality is. They just don't know what to expect. We've also got a pending war happening. Iraq and Israel. Tensions are starting to mount. And if the US steps in, then, well, it's going to be another story. Let's get with the program, ladies and gentlemen. So, treasuries are up. Now, this is really important because 3 out of 3 in auctions, all 3 of them have come in really well, saying that it's now investors are seeking US debt. Quickly going over. Look at this for a NASDAQ. NASDAQ, listen, NASDAQ is deemed as the nut job. They call it the widowmaker. They call it crack for traders, okay? But I played options on NASDAQ today. Look at this. This is so dead. Check this out. So I use IG for my options trading, and I opened some puts today on NASDAQ at the top side of this range, and we just got a little bit of a move. I closed out upon the success of a stopping volume candle, giving me the clue that things are probably going to change for the upside. I was trading towards this blue vector candle, and we only managed to make only £414. But when the MOG data came out, it spiked to about £1,500, but I wasn't able to close in time because obviously NASDAQ is a nut job. But I'm having to go to options now. And the reason why I'm playing options is this. When you're looking at the hybrid system, when you've got an imbalance in the chart, especially with NASDAQ, after this move up, this is where I was opening my option and the puts, and I was trading towards that logic. Now, when you're trading on the depth of market or you're trading on other platforms and what have you, options tend to be a little bit different in terms of your exposure. But ultimately, if they weren't going to clear the move to the upside, I opened on the red vector, traded back down towards the blue vector candle, and that's all I could take from the market today. That's all I could get. Nothing. Absolutely shocking. But in good news, the bond market got a nice little revival today, guys. Look, bonds have been going up, and that is on the success of these auctions that have come into play. So it goes here, solid sale of the 30-year treasuries, reduced fears that spiraling deficits are causing investors to shun the bonds. That's the problem right now. Investors are like, your deficit's going up, my friend. For every dollar that the US earns, they owe 120% on top. Now, obviously makes sense as to why your dollar is getting violated. Look at that. Absolute annihilation on the dollar. Speaking of which, gold is loving life. Gold is climbing up. Investors are probably going to be plowing into gold because, of course, tensions overseas between Iraq and Israel. That's naturally going to be fueling investors' idea to stay in safe haven. Speaking of which, reserving judgment on the gold rally. So listen, gold right now is the second most sought for asset by central banks, and you can't blame them. You really can't. Remember, gold goes up for a number of reasons, okay? But the 2 that we really want to focus on are as follows. safe haven mechanism, as in they are scared about war, so they will naturally go over to gold, or they don't know where we are with tariffs. We don't know where we are with whatever is concerning investors. Gold is always being seen as a safe haven. The second option is, of course, if the interest rates are going to get cut. Now, Trump today was saying we have to cut the rates, and he did say that I'm going to exercise something. I've got to do something about it. So now already we're going to be going into the FOMC, and if you haven't subscribed yet, then you're missing out on the biggest live stream that we can offer. But going into that FOMC, it's going to be interesting to see if any of the reporters do ask Jerome Powell about Donald Trump's comments. And Powell is, of course, going to turn around and be like, I refuse to comment on anything political and anything. Just shut up, Powell, man. The data is there. Look, 248,000 on the unemployment claims. It's gone up, but nothing more than what it was last month. PPI came in lower. That's good news in the sense where if prices are going down, that obviously can reflect that inflation is going to keep going down. But of course, Paul Tudor Jones did say that inflation is going to be up there at 3.5% and Bitcoin is your alternative. Speaking of which, what's the biggest risk to Bitcoin? I'm going to read to you a comment that was made by a gentleman. He said to me, stop hearting the comments, Tino, and answer this question. I was like, okay, then cool. So, courtesy of Black Cloud Indicator, he goes on to say the following. He says, what if, and then he put in the just saying, and then he put in, stop hearting the comments, Tino, address it in your live. My apologies, bro. Says, if huge companies deal with the Bitcoin ETF because the regulation or something doesn't allow them to trade real Bitcoin or whatever, one day they might just say, F it, if we don't hold the real coin and we can just dump it all. Price dumps to all-time lows. Any thoughts? So, what's the old saying, ladies and gentlemen? Let me just fix this. What's the old saying? Not your keys, not your coin. Now, let's just go back, right? And listen, don't come at me and be like, oh, this guy is negative. Face the reality of things, ladies and gentlemen. 30% of the supply of Bitcoin is being held by governments and corporate America. Where is decentralization? It's in the bin over there. It's dustbin. Decentralization is done. It's meant to be for the man, but the man wanted the other man to go and get the liquidity so that he could pump up his bags. You selfish mother. Anyways. Not your keys, not your coin. Now, we know with the Bitcoin ETF, it's all about transfer agents, authorized participants, APs like BlackRock, Fidelity, JP Morgan. They are authorized to engage in the management of this Bitcoin ETF. That means that when they have requirements from their clients to go and buy Bitcoin, they will get the Bitcoin, okay? And then it gets put to a transfer agent who will then take that Bitcoin and then store it in a vault. And then in replace of that, you've got the ETF to simplify it, right? So the Bitcoin's over there. BlackRock holds currently, hold on, 665,000 Bitcoin ETFs, okay? That's a lot of Bitcoin, ladies and gentlemen. That is a lot of Bitcoin inside of that, okay? Now, with that being said, ladies and gents, back to the gentleman's question, what if they actually just say, F it, get rid? Well, think about it. What do BlackRock get? They get fees on people who buy the ETF. So it doesn't matter what Bitcoin's price is. It doesn't matter what the balance is. We look at it and think, oh, the ETF. But institutional investors look at it and think, hold on a second, I don't want to really just buy, I can't really buy the Bitcoin because we're not regulated to do so. So I may as well take advantage of the ETF. The ETF is relatively cheaper anyway, so I can exploit that, put loads of money into it, and then pull it out as and when. Haven't you wondered why Meta shareholders have declined to add Bitcoin to the treasury? Microsoft declined to add Bitcoin to the treasury. Why aren't these big cats picking up Bitcoin? Come on, man. Especially tech companies. Now, Microsoft does have a lot of old players in the shareholders, in the board of directors as such, but Meta, those are all young people, man. And they obviously know about the Bitcoin. So naturally, you think that they'd be, down with the Bitcoin. But no, they turned it all down. So it does grant the question, is Bitcoin really getting used for its purpose, or are we going to see some wild price fluctuations on Bitcoin? You see, no one talks about the fact that Wall Street will always maintain Wall Street. That means if the client's happy with the green, then they're going to take that and run. In other words, if there's profit, they're going to take it. They ain't going to be caring about your rainbows. They're not caring about your 4-year cycles. They don't care about your miners position index, whether they're buying or they're selling. They don't care about Satoshi. Who? They don't care. They look for yield. That's why you're probably wondering, hold on a second, well, where are we with the safe havens like euro? Why is euro going up so much? Why is gold going up so much? Why is the Japanese yen going up so much? Why is Bitcoin had the day off? You know? I'm going to say this right. But the only utility, right, that this coin enables in terms of opportunities, in terms of an ecosystem that it can create, is Ethereum. As bad as it sounds. XRP, I'm not interested in that. That's just banking. That's whatever, right? But Ethereum, you got so many companies that have come from the Ethereum blockchain, and they provide all sorts of benefits. You know, Fetch AI, like we've spoken about that. Chainlink, Google been getting into bed with that bad boy. Okay, there's things, and I would say that with coins, altcoins, depending on the company, depending on the developers, whether they're coming or they're going, or whatever the story is, there's more of a use. Here we go. I'm going to get it right now. There's more of a use with Ethereum blockchain assets, you know, more of a use of altcoins than there is of Bitcoin. Am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to say that there's more of a use on Ethereum or blockchain Ethereum coins as such, altcoins, than there is Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin's an idea. Start again. Bitcoin's an idea. Is it not? Bitcoin is an idea. That's all it is. Now, you might think this guy is ripping Bitcoin apart. No, I'm not ripping Bitcoin apart. I'm trying to address the idea of maybe that's the biggest risk to Bitcoin, because it has now become Wall Street's. It's not the Bitcoin we knew, man. And it's sad. Remember, 30% of the supply is with governments. The same people you're trying to avoid, right? That's the sad truth of it all, ladies and gentlemen. This article is saying that Bitcoin could go below 100K. That's not me saying Bitcoin could go below 100K. That's me saying that this article is saying that Bitcoin could go below 100K. But let's just break it down. Tensions in the Middle East and this ominous Bitcoin chart fractal could play a role in sending Bitcoin back down to 100K. So how many of you have the expectation that that's the case? Okay, so it says here, Bitcoin futures position dominance. You can see it's not looking good. It says here, while a consolidation near 108,000 should not break bullish momentum, fractal analysis outlines the possibility of a deeper drawdown. So we are in what would be called a bull trap. Let's have a look. Let's simplify it, okay? Because we're all visual at the end of the day. Now, what do we say today? If Bitcoin stays below the 5 and 13 EMA, then we're probably going to be going lower. All right? Just to simplify it. You can take all these metrics, ladies and gentlemen. All right? You can do all of that. You can draw your lines and what have you, your RSIs and whatnot. Okay, but just look at the bigger picture of what's going on right now. Bitcoin is packed with people in Wall Street. Okay? So there is going to be an influence to that. If they need to take off their risk, they will take off that risk. This balance will go down and Bitcoin will go down. They'll just shove it back into the supply. And we do have a supply issue, okay? But looking at Bitcoin's price on the daily, it hasn't been able to successfully clear out the range. I mean, we do have a bit of a structure where all of this move to the upside has failed to clear out this range over here. And this is a candlestick coming into play and not going anywhere. It really isn't going anywhere. 3 days it's tried to break away from that zone and it hasn't succeeded in doing so. Looking at the stock market, I say this all the time to the Platinum members. If the NASDAQ is moving up, there's a good chance that Bitcoin will be moving up. But just look at the way the NASDAQ's behaving, right? 1 hour time frame, what have we got? Oh, it's just shocking. Absolutely disgusting. You know? I'd say XRP is much more better to trade than the NASDAQ. But the NASDAQ is just all about investors who are listening into what's being said. Bessent's been talking today. Trump's been talking today. Okay, who else was speaking today? We had Lutnick was speaking on the China deal, saying that they need to reevaluate certain things. So that deal's not really coming into play just yet. All right. So what you've got to understand is the stock market, especially the NASDAQ right now, anyone that speaks from the Trump administration, they are listening. And if they're hearing something that they don't like, they will pull out the market. They will then go back into the market. And this is what the problem's been with the marketplace. That's why you've got NASDAQ just behaving like this. Ultimately, we need to see one more spike to the upside, which will solidify the story of smart money. We're getting close. We're getting close to this peak, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, this extreme. When this extreme gets taken and the smart money logic comes to around, well, it's now at 30, where are we at? It's at 35, okay? So 0.35. Anything below that, when we get to like 0.2, which we have done before, I mean, that would be an absolute extreme. Absolute extreme. That would imply aggressive selling because retail right now is buying this up. And you know retail's buying it. Why? Because the volume. Let's have a look at the day's volume for the NASDAQ today. Here we go. So what we got? Oh, hold on. Let's just do the good old screenshot right there, ladies and gents, whilst I'm doing that. What? Holy shoot. Nah. Really? Is that the volume? Wow. Volume is massive on that right now. Hold on a second. Hold on. Nah. Whoa. That must mean, okay then. It's either Oracle, all right? So Oracle have done very, very well. But look at that. Wow. That is massive. Which then marries up to the idea of what we're saying over here. We're still waiting for another move to the upside for the NASDAQ. Because we ain't hit the extreme yet for smart money. So they haven't sold enough just yet. So that could potentially mean that maybe the NASDAQ is being primed to make a move higher. What could it be? What data could come out to suggest that's the case? Well, if we go to tomorrow, we've got preliminary consumer sentiment. And it's coming in with an expectation of it being higher, right? But inflation expectations, they're coming in at 6.6. If it comes in lower, then that's good news, okay? But ultimately, that is absolutely wild. That is a lot of volume, ladies and gentlemen. Seriously, look at that. That is a lot of volume. There has to, I mean, if you look at the price action, it's a lot of volume, but price hasn't been able to get above that zone. So, yeah, and you've got to also consider, I mean, I'm not trying to talk down on it, but it's just not making sense. The NASDAQ is near enough. Still got another 30 minutes until it finishes, and it could end up trading negative if it does continue to go down. Let's quickly go over to Oracle for a second. Because that bad boy right there has done very well. Up 14% for the day, ladies and gents. That is absolutely wild. Look at that, $200 a share, all-time highs. That is really, really good for that company. Let's just back that up a second and have a look at if the volume has primarily come from that. Here we go. And I'm going to talk about MicroStrategy right now because people are saying that MicroStrategy is not moving the same way as Bitcoin should. Interesting. All right, then. So, yeah, there's a lot of volume. Okay. 159% increase on the volume. Okay. 560 billion. So their market cap has gone up roughly. Hold on a second, ladies and gentlemen. Was that yesterday? That was about 400 million, 425 billion yesterday. Wow, it's gone up quite a bit. A lot of flavors coming to Oracle, guys, and it's broken out of its all-time high. Volume right there is massive. Okay, so yeah, look, so earnings and sales. So sales were accelerating and earnings are pretty much flat. So keep an eye out on this if you're a long-term investor in this company, okay? Because then you want to see the next quarterly earnings showing an increase in earnings and in sales accelerated, okay? So if you see it go to like 6% on the earnings and then 12% on the sales going into the next quarter, and ladies and gentlemen, you've got yourself a winner right here because there's been a lot of accumulation from here to break out of this, what would look like a nice cut with handle in principle, but it's got decent strength right there. So I would take that into consideration, okay? Any other questions, guys, other than that? Oh, yeah, let's just go over to MicroStrategy just for a split second because I did get another question and the gentleman was like, can you talk about the idea that MicroStrategy is tethering away from the idea of Bitcoin? I mean, it's not so much tethering away, but MicroStrategy has got too many people that are borrowing or well, money that is being borrowed to effectively fund the idea of Bitcoin purchases. And a few investors are getting a little bit concerned because if the stock market does take a nosedive, all these participants have got risk right now in MicroStrategy. The only people that are winning with this accumulation of Bitcoin is strategy because they hold the Bitcoin. They generate the yield. Shareholders who have gone in and taken advantage of the convertible bonds that have come into play with MicroStrategy, all right, they cannot really get rid of their positions until MicroStrategy's share price hits $600. That's one of the clauses in there. Or you get massive fines for closing off the position. So there is a possibility in my eyes that MicroStrategy is just going to keep on rolling over, all right? But because you've got the ETF, equally, that's just going to sustain Bitcoin's move to the upside if they keep on accumulating the Bitcoin. Quickly going in BlackRock, there we go. It's been buying a little bit more. 3 hours ago, okay, 369, 1,200 Bitcoin. So people are stepping into it. So that's good news for that. Quickly going over into Bitcoin a second. So yeah, it's been very difficult. Bitcoin's not even given any direction per se. It's come up to come down. It's absolute dog show. Tino, what time frame do you wait for the candle to close on the Brinks box to signal your move? I got battered today trading futures on Bitcoin. Listen, man, let me tell you this. The conventional idea of the Brinks box is you get a high, you get a low. It's similar to the opening range breakout, okay? That's what you've got. You've got a high and you've got a low, right? And when the Brinks box finishes, which is 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m., whatever direction price goes, if it can break the Brinks box high, retrace and hold, okay, then the logic says it's going to start making a move to the upside, okay? And likewise, when you're looking at it for the downside, it's the same principle, okay? But look at the environment that you're in. All right, I'm looking at these green vector candles and I've been expecting Bitcoin to come down towards these vectors, but they've not made it really easy for that because people are just all over the place with it. Look at all those bids and those offers that were picked up earlier on today. Yeah, look at that. How all those guys were buying, for God's sake, all the guys were buying in this area. They've effectively sold that liquidity now. Now they're going to start building the same process again. All right, investors are short term with Bitcoin. That's the problem we've got. They're in with it and they're out with it as well, especially when you're buying $31 million worth of Bitcoin. And then when we go up and have a look, you can see that they must have sold. Yeah, they did sell quite a bit of Bitcoin in that range. Just I need to refresh the chart. Let me just do that right now just to put it into perspective. Yeah, I know. I'm just going to pay for it in a minute, man. Relax yourself. Here we go. So here we are. Look. Oh, my days. Look at this. So we know that earlier on there was about $30 million worth of Bitcoin purchased, all right? 8.49 million was sold on the move up. Keep going up again. You got 16 million sold up there. Keep going up again. You got 4 million sold. Keep going up. You got another million up there. And then at the top side right there, we had 2.55 million. And then we had 3 million up there. So let's make the assumption that the dudes that were buying down here could effectively be selling in increments. Look, 60 million there, all the way back up again. And that's the problem we've got. It's because Bitcoin is being sold too soon. They want a quick buck and then it brings it back down again and they collect the bids and they rinse and repeat this story over and over again. The only next logical spot for Bitcoin to end up, in my opinion, okay, where you're going to get the biggest interest is at this zone down here near the 100K mark. That's where the biggest interest is. So if I'm saying to you that that's an area where you're going to find the biggest interest, logic says that that would be an area that you could collect Bitcoin at that price, with the intention that if it does reverse from that point, you could grab yourself a $3,000-$4,000 move in Bitcoin. Happy days, you walk off. Done. Remember, Bitcoin, the idea of Bitcoin is great. okay? But because of this manipulation and the fact that it's subject to all that BS from Donald Trump, Bitcoin shouldn't be subject to the tariffs. Bitcoin shouldn't be subject to interest rates. Well, technically it is, because if your dollar's down, why is your Bitcoin down? But relative to it, Bitcoin is trading at significant highs. It's not spent too much time up there. Look, let's just have a look right now on the higher time frames. Let's wait there. Look at this. To put it into perspective, Bitcoin is doing great at its all-time highs. You can't complain about that, guys. You can't. It's not dropping massively or anything like that. Remember, I'm a day trader. I'm looking for the day's high, low, and that's me. I'm done. I'm not looking for the $55 million Bitcoin or the $250,000 Bitcoin. I'm looking for the realistic price of Bitcoin. Maybe we could clean the 16,000. Maybe we could come down towards this area of support, 100,000, for it to bounce again. These are logical areas of speculation that you can work with and at least make some money from it. All right? But when you're going into positions on Bitcoin and when you hear someone saying, oh, Bitcoin is so cheap right now, brother, it's $106,000. Yeah, but the technology means it's going to go up. Oh, fuck that, man. I can't make a decision on that. I can't make a decision on what you like the idea of Bitcoin. Doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. I'm going to put my own money down to buy Bitcoin at 106,944 because people say it's cheap. And then come 7-8 months time, Bitcoin goes to like 180,000. They'll come back to this live stream and say, "Hi, you were saying to people to not bother with it. Ha, ha, ha." Yeah, but that's 6-month difference. People want the money now. They don't want to wait 6 months. You know? You run the risk of maybe Bitcoin comes back down again. Bitcoin can come back down, and it's okay for it to come back down. Because the same participants that are picking it up on the discount are going to be the same guys that you're going to be buying it from. Well, why don't you reverse that and be the guy that's buying with them and then sell together? Capiche? That's my logic. Hey, we all like the idea of a lot of stupid shit. Please look into Circle price. Yes, sir. I will look into Circle's price. Listen, man, that Circle story and the Genius stablecoin issue. Where is it? I called it Genesis. Anyway, Circle, here we go. Yep, look at that. It's coming back down. All right. So we got some consolidation coming into play. I expect it to come down a little bit more, guys. Quite frankly, it had a storming IPO, massive IPO, just going into the 24 billion. You can't complain about that. But at $106, it's a discount. But remember, when Coinbase was actually on its IPO, look what happened to Coinbase at that time. Just to put it into perspective for you. Wait there. Look at this. So Coinbase IPO, absolutely brilliant. What was it? High of $429, closed at 342 at the close. And then what did it do? It just took a shoe bag, went up, and then just completely collapsed, but then made it all the way back up again. Okay. Remember, what you got to understand with IPOs is this: the business model doesn't change. Yeah. Price action does not represent the business model. So Coinbase is a fantastic company. It helps everyone in cryptocurrency. It's massive. So with its price action going down, does that undermine the concept of the business? No, because it was the only company in the US stock market that was holding it down for crypto. This allowed mom and dad investors to get exposure into crypto without having to buy crypto. I just invest in Coinbase, right? And all of this play right here is just accumulation. So they're buying and buying and buying. And now they're selling it all up. That's why earnings encourages price action to just move up. Every time you get a good earnings announcement, it pumps. Because people jump in like, oh my God, look, it's going up. Let's quickly buy. And those guys have been like, they've been buying down here and the news announcements come and it's just off. They're selling into that, you know? But remember, on an earnings announcement for an IPO, give it time and just think about how big Circle is going to become because of this Genius stablecoin bill and everything else that's coming around stablecoins. Who was it today? Who wanted to make their own stablecoin? GameStop. Is it GameStop? No, GameStop wants to do the same thing as Strategy and offer out $1.5 billion in shares to buy the Bitcoin. Wow. The Strategy is doing very well, Strategy. You know? Hey, Tina, could you check out QBTS? Yo, listen, I mentioned this, right? Listen to this, right? QBTS is that quantum-based company. Look, QBTS. Listen, These guys, right? I don't hold this stock at all. I'm not associated with them at all. Okay. But listen, this is a quantum company. Okay. It says here that they develop quantum computing systems, software, and services, right? Listen, man, we're going in the age of quantum computing. That's the next thing. All right. When this company finds its feet, right? I'm telling you, man, this is going to be a win for a lot of people at a measly $15 a share. Look what Nvidia was back in the day, right? Look at the fund ownership. It's increasing quite well. 53, 80, 127, 179. Funds are getting into this. Ownership is management is 5%. Funds own 18% of the stock. It does trade on average a decent amount of shares per day, but average daily volume at 70 million. This is a big boy, ladies and gentlemen. Is a beast. But other companies inside of that, IonQ. Okay, so here's an example. What are these guys? Develops trapped ion quantum computers for the purpose of commercial, industrial, and academic applications. What's going on there? Again, big, just under $1 billion in market cap. Bang, doing really well. It's trading nicely, all right? 341 funds own this stock. And of course, funds have 27% of the stock and management have 5% of the stock. So you can safely assume that quantum-based computing is something of the future, especially at $38 and especially at $15. All right. If you just go in the monthly, look, IPO slumps, come straight back up. We're back into quantum, ladies and gentlemen. All right. It's not a young company. It's not an old company. It's new. But when you get a company like this for a certain sector, pay attention to it. Because if they're going to be the guys that are going to be leading it, it's going to start with this company and their share price is going to be representation of that. And investors are going to be plowing into it, okay? So as long as quantum computing starts to develop and you keep an eye on what's going on with the developments of quantum computing, go out and research what's happening. Go and attach who's introducing what. Go and see if it marries up with this company, or go and find if there's another company that is doing it better than this company. Are they listed? Are they private? And then just dive into it like that. When you're buying stock, ladies and gentlemen, it's a process. You've got to become one with the stock. You've got to literally, it's like babysitting a child, right? If you're a care worker and you're going and working in a nursery and you're allocated a child, you're going to have to study that child and understand when it's upset, when it's happy, when it's hungry, when it's not. Literally, that's what stocks is about, right? But in this day and age right now, ladies and gentlemen, with quantum, with everything about AI, boy, my opinion is anything related to quantum computing, it's for the long run, man. It really is. You know, it is for the long run, in my opinion. Victoria, listen to these scams. Tino, can you address what is happening with the Swiss franc and the Swiss bonds? Right. Okay. Let me just quickly have a look, because you know what? I haven't really paid attention to that. Okay, Swiss franc. So something's obviously, look, just from looking at the chart of USD against the Swiss franc, that must mean that they are increasing. They're cutting the rates of the Swiss franc. I know they cut them because they're very cheap. Over here, look, Swiss franc right there is 0.25%. So as a safe haven, they're plowing into Swiss. That's what they're doing. They're borrowing Swiss, which would then only mean... they're putting it... Yeah, they've been putting it into euros. Yeah, so they're borrowing Swiss, right? Which means that the bonds market, if I'm correct, Swiss bonds, let me just get that up. Swiss bonds. Where is my Swiss bonds? Where are we? I haven't looked at these dudes for a long time. Swiss. No. Here we go. No, I'm not getting the information that I want. Swiss bonds. Wait there. Swiss bonds. Where we at? Here we go. Here we are. Trading economics. This is the Swiss bonds story. So check this out. Look. Yes, thank you very much. Go away. All right, then. So the yield on the 10 years, 0.2. Okay, so their bonds are up. The yields are down. The bonds are up. So it says the bond yield eased at 0.23% June 12th, 2025, marking a 0.03% percentage point decrease. So the bond itself is going up, but the only reason why it's going up, guys, is because it's cheap to borrow. Okay, so, and that's what happens when you've got countries like, I mean, look at the euro. The euro is just flying up, man. And the yields on the euro are just taking a nosedive, short-term yields as well. So that really does put things into perspective about where money is going, because it's all about what's cheap. All right. Always consider what currency is cheap. So if we just go and have a look at this for a second, look at this. This is the CME rate swap monitor. Okay. So basically it says it calculates the implied interest rate differential for 8 currency pairs using tradable pricing data for CME Fiat FX futures and the central limit order book. So what you're looking at is what everybody else looks at, and you can become a member on the CME group. It's free. Just use your email, sign up, and you get access to this. Okay. Wow. 162% return on the yen over a 2-day period and 74% on the euro over a 2-day period. That is just unbelievable. Absolutely wild. So where's the Swiss right now? Swiss, there you go. Swiss against the US dollar, you're getting 180%, man. These are yields, right? The things that are happening right now in the marketplace are not making sense. And it's all about the dollar just crashing and just going to the bin. All right. And this is what Trump is just so desperate to get those interest rates cut. So desperate because it's hurting the dollar. It really is. Great for Bitcoin. Well, not so much. Even now, it's just taking a nosedive and going lower back to that psychological range. It's not good. Not good. Anything else? Tino, because the euro is getting smashed, is it better to invest in Europe as a European citizen? Invest? See, you've asked me this question before, right? When we're talking about if you invest in the Eurozone, you got to remember as well, guys, the dollar is at significant lows. It's at 3-year lows. You've got to be careful because everyone now is going to be going into the euro in principle. And the only issue is this, right? Is let's look at it like this. If the US deficit keeps on going up, gold's price will shoot, euro's price will keep on going higher. But haven't you not noticed that the one deal that everybody is waiting for is not being done yet? The Eurozone. There are no trade talks. The window is getting close, and that's a little bit of a problem, you know, for the extension or the pause. So we're going to hear some news soon about the Eurozone. And I think that the Eurozone is going to be the zone where the talks break down. I think there's going to be breakdown in talks. I really do think. And China got sanctions. I think the Eurozone could end up getting sanctions because your dollar is getting violated by the euro. How else are you going to control the euro's strength? The fact that their interest rate is so low, well, 2.14%. I'm borrowing euros. I'm going over to yen. This would be now the perfect time for the BRICS to step in. But the problem with the BRICS, guys, is all those dudes that are trying to create a different currency, all right, and move away from the petrodollar as such, they're all heavily invested in the dollar. So they're pretty much shitting themselves right now because their investments are just slapped because the purchasing power of the dollar is zilch, you know? So you'll never replace the dollar, but it's going in for a big smack. You know, something has to give, in my opinion. And we've got the tax bill meeting right now at the White House. That's going to be interesting. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? 300 likes. I'm answering your questions, man. Like the stream. It costs you nothing. Tino, there is a very good crypto project called Pi Network, and it's different from other cryptos. What do you think of it? Man, they always say that about cryptos, man. Pi Network, there's so much behind all that. I know about Pi Network. It's just my opinion, you know, just don't go with it. Tina, do you trade the major indices with 3x leverage ETFs like UpPro and TQQQ? No, I use it on eToro, but I got rid of my exposure on eToro because of the bonds. When Trump came into power and he started talking about these tariffs, I was like, okay, the bonds are going to get smacked. So I got rid of that exposure because I was invested in the bond ETFs. And I was like, I'm not happy about that. So didn't make much, about $300-400 or something, but it was only for a short window. Excuse me. But yeah, that's it. Tina, with the dollar at 3-year lows and the pre-tariff inventory running out, are we about to see CPI and PPI spike hard? More than likely. I'm expecting inflation to spike back up because this is the crap thing, right? All the information that's come out regarding inflation is not factoring in the idea of tariffs. Trump's come out and said we're going to do tariffs. Then he's come out with pauses. All right. Companies have had to increase the cost of their imports, cost of their goods because of import duties that are going up. And then, of course, Trump puts out these tariffs and then reimburses everyone because of the tariffs. Right. It's a mix up. So Powell is pretty much saying, like, we don't really have the true representation of data. That's what he'll say, because we don't know where we stand with the tariffs. We don't know where we are. Trump's just banging on about this bill. The debt ceiling's been increased. So we're already done with the deficit. Gold's price is going to keep going up. Iraq-Israel war, gold all-time high. That's it. Dollar down. You know? I believe inflation's going to go up because we haven't really got that much of a difference in the last reading. Look, 2.4%, they expected 2.5, and it was previously 2.3. So inflation's gone up, not down. You know? Anything else? And then we'll call it a day. Do you believe euro could reach about 1.5 long term? If yes, where would you recommend to place euros in that time? Listen, the logic of euro continuing its move to the upside. I mean, Bitcoin's just getting smacked to the... Guys, remember the psychological ranges? You remember the psychological ranges? If you are new to this live stream, type 1. That's all you got to do. If you're new, type 1. So I know my audience. Type 1. Type 1. I know there's a delay. Bitcoin, Tina, dude, wrap it up. Bitcoin doesn't like it. What, is because I'm talking it's going down? Nah, don't worry about that. Yes. Okay, cool. Listen. The psychological levels are important because, like I said to you last week, study them because price always ends up doing something at these ranges, you know? And it's back down towards those zones. Get on the website, the PDF. This is for the platinum members. You learn about the psychological ranges, the Brinks box and V-shapes and all the red vector candles, everything. It's a wealth of information about the hybrid system. But on the Traders Reality website, you get the free PDF, but there is a course. Do the course. It's free. Do the free course. It breaks down the logic of the hybrid system, okay? Look, you got other courses right here, but if you do this course, this is the free one, all right? When you start that, go over to the psychological levels right there. There's a whole section on it, and it helps you understand how to use those levels, okay? Very powerful bit of information regarding the first high and the first low that's formed at the start of the trading week, okay? Cool. Well, if you are new, make sure you subscribe. Tina, when inflation goes up, why does the Fed need to increase the rates? Shouldn't it be the opposite? Listen, if inflation goes up, because fundamentally inflation, the problem that we've got right now is you've got inflation going, well, not going up, but it is looking like it's coming down. It's tame, okay? But what the Fed's got to roll with, it's not working with inflation. It's working with tariffs. It's working with policy changes. It's working with a dead bond market. It's working with a dead dollar. It's working with a stubborn workforce. Even the housing market is starting to come to a bubble. It's getting ready to collapse. Like the pan is getting very, very filled with lots and lots of, you know. But if the inflation, right, if they cut the interest rates, right, it releases liquidity, right? But naturally, that does prompt inflation. But because we've got tariffs, the Fed wants to avoid cutting the rates, okay, to get inflation down, just so that they can create a buffer for the tariffs, which might have an impact on inflation. Honestly, it's got everyone scratching their head about what the Fed's going to do. And Trump's the player here that's going to be the trigger for inflation. He really is. Because we're assuming that everyone's going to be doing deals with the US. But the two main countries, China and Euro, you know, China and Euro, they can get into bed together. They're all good. But the Euro can be delayed on it because whilst they're delaying this tariff story and not communicating with the US, their Euro is shooting up. And that's good news for them. It is ridiculous. He is extremely late on cutting rates. But let's be honest now. right? Do you think it's wise to cut the rates? If you want to cut the rates, right? Cool. Trump wants to increase the deficit. Well, he wants to do tax cuts. Great for the people. Absolutely great. But you're going to increase the deficit. That undermines the bonds. That makes investors seek more of a return for buying the bonds. That forces the yields higher. Corporate debt gets refinanced. And then, of course, it's done at higher yields because the interest rates are high. This is why Trump wants to cut the rates. But by cutting the rates, and you're going to cut taxes, you're going to force us straight back into inflation and more. Look, anything that Trump's saying, right? He's talking about it being beneficial for the US in 10 years. That's the problem we've got. His long scope thought process. That's like Michael Saylor saying, look, man, Bitcoin's going to go to 13 million in the year 2045. Whatever happens now, doesn't matter. If it goes down to zero, doesn't matter. 2045, 2045, Bitcoin's going to go to 13 million. Man, I'm spitting when I'm talking. That is my cue to exit, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's live. I've kept you here long enough. Hit the like button, subscribe on the way out, and check out tradersreality.com for more information. Asia's going to be an interesting evening, ladies and gentlemen, and sell XRP. Get rid of that dustbin. Mad love and respect. Peace.